this is something you can do on your patio, at your windowsill. You can put it on your balcony and in the front of your home. So there are options for vegetable gardening, which we'll cover that really briefly in a quick 5-minute video towards the end. And I will let Mr. Crumsey go ahead and take over from here.
All right, so good evening, everybody. My name is Brandon Crumsey, and I am the UGA Clayton County Extension Agriculture and Natural Resources Agent. And today we are talking fall gardening again. So just before we start, I have a quick poll that should be on the screen right now, just to kind of gauge where everyone's at as far as, you know, your green thumb capabilities. So if you can complete this poll for me real quick. All right, so I am ending the poll. A few more seconds. All right, so this is what we got. So the first poll question was, describe your knowledge of vegetable gardening. So most of you, about half of you already have a veggie garden, so that's pretty good. About 30% said they know nothing. And about 20% said they know a few things. And the biggest problem by far I see is pest control. So that's actually great for me, because there's a whole section that I'm going to get into about, you know, basic, easy things that you can do to help control pests in your garden. So appreciate that. So let's get into it. So today we're talking about falling into veggie gardening during the fall time. So right now, like today, it's real rainy. We're starting to see the weather get a lot cooler. So that's a sign that we should be switching to our fall garden plants. So the first thing that we should keep in mind is this saying, you know, if you fail to plan, if you fail to plan, you basically planning to fail, right? So before starting a garden, or if you already have a garden and it's not doing well, these are some questions that you want to kind of ask yourself. So, you know, first off, who's doing the work, right? So is it just going to be you by yourself? Or is your family going to help you, or your coworkers going to help you? You know, so that's a big question. What do you like to eat? So, you know, all the vegetables that you like to eat, they most likely won't be grown in the same season. So making sure that you plant stuff that you actually like, because that's going to help motivate you to keep up with the garden, of course. And then how you use this produce. You know, are you going to use it for canning, preserving, or are you just going to give it away? Are you just going to grow it just because you like how it looks, you know, whatever. And then, of course, how much will you grow?
You must have good ideas.
So the first thing that we need to keep in mind is the site selection of your garden. So in real estate, they say location, 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 right? So before you even start thinking about starting a garden, or if you can look at your current garden right now and you're trying to figure out why it's not doing well, you want to look at the location of that garden. So the first thing to know is veggies really like sun. So you need a spot that's going to get at least 6 to 8 hours of sunlight. So I have this picture here of this beautiful yard on the right-hand side. You know, the grass and the lawn is very manicured. They have nice shrubs. They have a big tree. But you notice that, you know, it's obviously daytime, but this whole yard is shaded. So chances are this yard probably gets very little sunlight throughout the day. So if they're trying to start a veggie garden, you know, they probably want to look closer to the back porch of that house where there's less greenery that's blocking the sunlight, right? Then the second thing, so this is probably about as huge as sunlight access, so it's water access, right? So for my personal garden, my garden is right at my back door, and the faucet is just around the corner on the opposite side of where my beds are. So if you're putting a garden somewhere, you want to make sure you can easily use a hose or use a watering can to water, because me personally, I'm not gonna put a garden that's like 500 feet away from my house, meaning I have to walk 5 minutes down the road to get to it, right? Because then I'm just not gonna want to be bothered with it, right? So making sure that it's close to a water source, and then it's in a place that can get a lot of sunlight. So like we were talking about earlier, there are many different ways for you to garden, right? So veggie gardening just isn't, you need a bunch of open land and you need a tractor and you need to till it up and all that stuff. So one of the easiest ways you can start a veggie garden is to use a raised bed. So these are some raised beds at this senior center where I used to work. And raised beds are largely made out of wood, but they can be made out of bricks. They can be made out of plastic, a bunch of different materials. But these are often, off the ground. So if you don't want to bend over as much, you can make a raised bed. It's easier to control weeds. Just overall easier to manage a garden when they're in this kind of confined area. So then you have container gardening. So we just had an awesome class on container gardening a few weeks ago. So you can really get creative with your containers. And this picture here, this is a picture of just some 5-gallon plastic buckets, that you could probably get for free somewhere that they're using for a container gardening. But, you can use regular pots or other different things to start your veggie plants on a porch or on a balcony or in a small space. And then the traditional way, of course, is to use the in-ground garden. So if you have a nice plot of land in your backyard or wherever on your landscape, you can also use that as well. So now we have our location, and now that you're thinking about how you're gonna, I guess, kind of house your plants in your garden, you want to think about the soil. So the soil is the life of the party, right? So everything in gardening goes back to the soil. So if you have good, healthy soil, then chances are you're going to have good, healthy plants. But if you have poor quality soil, then you're probably going to have poor quality plants too. So one of the characteristics of good soil is good drainage too. So this is a picture of a lawn that has a lot of standing water on it. So like this week is a perfect week for you to get out into your yard and see where does the water like to collect at. So if you're doing an in-ground garden, for example, you want to avoid any areas where water likes to sit for long periods of time, because if you have veggie crops there, that means those roots are going to be sitting in water as well, and that cuts off their oxygen levels, which can ultimately kill the plants if they're waterlogged too long. So how you can prepare your soil once you do find a suitable location, of course, you can till up the soil. As we see here, he's removing this grass and tilling up the soil, kind of breaking it up in preparation for a garden. You can add organic matter. So we're pretty much moving into fall right now, so the leaves are starting to turn color. So leaves are actually one of the best organic matter materials that you can add to your soil, because those leaves are going to break down into a rich compost, and that really improves the quality of your soil. So other organic matter includes, compost, animal manure, if you can get that from somewhere. So these are great things that help with drainage, help with the nutrient content of the soil as well. So this is where we come in. So here at your local UGA Extension office, here in Clayton, we charge just $10 per soil sample, and one soil sample can represent up to 15 acres. But if we're just talking about a small veggie garden, you should definitely get a soil sample. It's cheap, and this is what you would get back on your report. So on the left-hand side here, we see the nutrient content of the soil here. So this is just the basic nutrient content. So we're talking about phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, zinc. So it'll basically tell you whether or not you need to add these nutrients to your soil. And then on the left, we're talking about the pH, which is how acidic or how alkaline your soil is. So for vegetable crops, you want your pH to be between 6 and 7, which is right in the middle of the scale on a 1 to 14 scale. So just for $10, you get all this awesome information for your veggie garden, and then you kind of know where to start and how to build up your soil. So then fertilizer, so in general, depending on the type of soil you have, your soil test report is going to tell you to apply varying amounts of fertilizer. But in general, you want to add fertilizer by broadcasting it evenly throughout the bed, or you can also use a banding method, as we see in this picture, where they add fertilizer kind of in a little in a little ditch next to the crops. But overall, this is just going to depend on the type of soil that you have. So then some other ones that are would be considered organic. So you have things like bone meal, alfalfa meal, blood meal, all those different products, and they're all contain varying amounts of different nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, things like that. And then this is the pH scale. So this is kind of back to science class. So, in general, we want to be around 6 or 7 with our veggie crops. So if it's too low, it's not going to be ideal for your plants. And if it's too high, it's also not going to be ideal for your plants either. So how do you change the pH? So say that you get your soil report back for your veggie garden and the pH is a 4. So 4 would be extremely acidic. So what you can do to raise your pH would be to add garden lime. So you add the lime, and it's best to do this about 6 months in advance. You can water it in, till it in, and then over time that lime is going to react in the soil, and it's going to raise that pH to where it needs to be. And the soil test that you get from us will tell you how much lime you need to add to change the pH to where it needs to be. But if the soil test is, so if the pH is too high, so say, it came back like a 13, you would want to lower that all the way down to a 6 or a 7. So that's when you would want to use your sulfur or your soil acidifier that's pictured on the right. So those 2 products is what you use to control that. And then, so talked about tillage. So planting crops. So I just went to the garden store yesterday and I purchased some fall plants for my garden. So when you're talking about crops, right? So if you're going to your garden store, in general, this is how it's going to kind of look. So you're going to have a bunch of different varieties. They may have a few varieties of collards and cabbage and things like that. So that's something to keep in mind when you're planning out your garden. What type of variety are you going to get? But we also have this great tool that it's called a vegetable planting chart. And some of you may have gone by the Keep Riverdale Beautiful office and got this because their office gave it out this past week. But this is a really easy thing to follow. So as you can see on the left, it lists the type of crop that you have. So you can see we have cabbage, and then it has days to maturity. So the days to maturity is referring to the time it takes for the seed to reach maturity and the rough time it takes for the transplant you buy from the store to reach maturity. So you can see here the days to maturity. It has recommended cultivars that we should use here in Georgia. And then it has planting date. So I think today is the 16th. So you can see, according to this chart, you still have 2 weeks to plant cabbage for the best cabbage production this season. So if you would like this chart after the presentation, you can email me and I can just send you this chart for your reference. So your other option is to use seeds. So I guess my favorite thing about using seeds in the garden is you can go to a seed store, you can look online, and there are just a ton of different seed varieties that you can use, because, we're used to, kind of generic looking vegetables in the supermarket, right? Everyone has the same stuff, but seeds, you can find varieties of your favorite foods in different colors and different shapes and different sizes. The only thing is they're going to be kind of a slower start. So, most times people might not want to wait for the seeds to sprout and, produce the veggies that you want, but you're also going to have more variety, and they are going to be cheaper than your transplants. But the key thing with transplants is you get faster results, right? So you can go to the store right now, you can get these transplants, and you don't have to wait as long to get a harvest from them. And they're really easy to plant. You put them in the ground. They're going to be more expensive than a seed packet. And then you're also going to have less variety, because most stores are just going to, pretty much sell the same varieties everywhere, the same few. So then the key is to make sure that you're planting in season. So we're nearing, the beginning of October. So now is not the time to try to, plant some tomatoes and peppers and okra, because that stuff is phasing out right now because of the weather. So now we're in the cool season, which is fall and winter, and early spring. So we're looking mainly at our collard greens, for Thanksgiving, our lettuce, our spinach, our broccoli, things like that. So then in general, for the fall, you're looking at your cold crops. So that's going to include, your broccoli, your cauliflower, you got cabbage, Brussels sprouts, your leafy greens, like your kale, pretty popular. A lot of your root crops can be grown right now in the fall. So beets, carrots, onions, radishes, and then more of your leafy greens, your spinach, your lettuce. And the thing about greens is you can use a popular harvesting method called cut and come again, because what greens is, we're growing greens for the leaves. So how do we harvest that? We basically cut the leaves over and over again to get our harvest of that crop. So I'm just going to show you this quick video that shows you kind of how that works in these plants.
How do we take a field of lettuce, just like this, and turn it into a bowl of lettuce day after day for pretty much the entire year? We're going to use something called the cut and come again method, and there's 2 different ways to do it. We're going to talk about that in today's video.
With cut and come again, what you're trying to do is preserve the growing tip of the plant. And for lettuce and many leafy greens, that is in the center, and we call it the crown. And so what you're seeing me do here with this bib lettuce, very standard, classic type of lettuce, is come around the outside. And you can do it clockwise, counterclockwise. But what you're trying to do here is take away those large, mature leaves. And I'm doing it here with this Merlot lettuce too, which is more of a frilly variety. This one I'm going to take down pretty considerably just to show you a peek at what the inside really looks like. Because if you do damage the crown, then your plant is done for good. And so you really want to avoid that. You're seeing me take away these outside leaves. And look, there's just very small versions of those leaves in here. So if we dig in, we can see the future of this plant, basically. These are 4 or 5, maybe even 6 little leaves that are in development. And in 4 or 5 days, you'll see those really start to come out. And so you can do this with something like spinach too. Come around, make sure that you're not chopping off that crown, get around the outside, and you're going to get a lot more yield out of this because you're taking off those mature leaves, letting them grow up, and then doing the same thing. So we can see here, crown is the exact same. Those baby lettuce leaves are coming out, those spinach leaves. And now here is a different method. This is a more efficient method. So you can come in with a chef's knife or something similar. Make sure you know right about where the crown is so you don't chop off too much of it. And then grab it like a head of hair almost, and then just come through and slice. And you're going to want a really sharp knife for this. And so you've got a nice bunch of lettuce. You've preserved the crown. We can see I didn't chop the crown off. And there we go. It's really that simple, guys. So the cut and come again method explained in about a minute or 2.
Well, there we have it. The cut and come again method, very simple, explained. You can get bowls of lettuce day after day using this method as long as you're doing it the right way. But it does bring us to a couple questions. And the first question is, how many times can I actually cut one of these plants before it actually is just done for good? Which is a great question. So usually it really does depend on the type of plant, the type of lettuce or leafy green that you're doing. But for the most part, anywhere from 3 to 5 cuts, and that's about it. So, it's not like the plant's just going to continue producing forever, like it might if you look at my basil video. I have a video on how to prune basil. You can more or less keep it going forever, relatively speaking. It still will die, but much later than a green. For something like, this loose leaf lettuce right here, you're gonna get 3 to 5 cuts before the quality of the leaf is going to start to degrade. It won't be this big, and it also won't taste that good, and it's going to sort of be just a little bit uglier, and just the plant is trying to bolt because it knows that its life is coming to an end, but you're not really giving it the energy and the ability to do so, so then you're in a bad spot. So that's it. Endless supply of lettuce. I'm gonna go make a salad now, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Hit like, hit subscribe if you enjoyed it.
Yeah, so that's something to keep in mind. So we can stop here. I guess if we have any questions about what we just went over. All right, well, no questions. All right, so we'll get into pest control. So this is y'all's biggest problem, right? So trying to kind of compete with nature on, your prized produce, right? So this is probably the most interesting part of gardening. So, here's something to know though. So identification is the best thing when it comes to pest control. So sometimes people will call me and they'll say, this thingamajig, whatchamacallit, with red teeth, it was big and such is eating up my tomatoes. What should I spray? So when I get questions like this, I can't, there's nothing I can really recommend to you because I don't know what pest it is, right? So if I don't know what the pest looks like, what the specific name of it is, I can't recommend a product to you because I guess probably one of the common mistakes people make is they think if they spray one pesticide in the garden that it's just gonna protect their crops from everything. But really, pest control is about really specialization and identification because everything is not going to be controlled by the same product. So the best thing for you to do is to use something we call IPM. So this is called integrated pest management. So let's look at this picture right here on this slide. So this is a kitchen that's, full of dirty dishes. We'll just say these have been sitting here for a month. So if this was your friend's house and they told you, man, I just have a major problem with roaches and rats and mice in my house, what should I do? So what would be the first thing that you all tell them? Like, what's wrong with this picture? And you can unmute yourselves or you can use the chat if you want.
Start by washing the dishes.
Why is that?
Because they are attracted to something, which that something is leftover food. So to eradicate that, you would wash the dishes first and then move forward and identify any other factors.
So why wouldn't they just, go get some Raid from the store and then spray their whole house down with Raid or a fogger?
You need to clean first.
Yeah, they gotta
Because
go back
if
to
you
step
don't,
one.
right, if you don't identify the issue, then it'll keep coming back.
Right. Right.
And
So
start
all
with the least
y'all
toxic
went
thing
back
first.
to, oh, go ahead.
Start with the least toxic measure first.
Yep. Yep. So you always want to, so part of the goal of using IPM or integrated pest management is you'll notice that the last step in this strategy is chemical control. So the first option shouldn't be to, soak your house in Raid or whatever. You gotta, number one, look for the root of the problem, or number one, look for how can I prevent pests from even being a problem for me. So we can see here, you can prevent, these type of pests from entering your house by, keeping it clean and keeping these dishes washed and things like that. So the same way you handle this is the same way you handle how you work in the garden. So the first thing to keep in mind is prevention. So before we even talk about, the caterpillars eating up the leaves on your collars and all that, let's go all the way back to you at the garden store. So when you're at the garden store and you're buying these plants, or what I do, in general, I like to see the ones that look the healthiest and they might already have a vegetable on them, right? But I also like to inspect the plant to see if they have any bugs on them already. So if I'm buying garden plants and let's say they have a bunch of aphids or caterpillars on them, or they have black spots on them everywhere, I'm buying that plant and I'm bringing it home to my garden. And then now I myself have just introduced a pest problem into my own garden because I didn't inspect the plants that I just purchased. So this is, one example of how you can prevent something from even happening in the first place, right? So second thing is scouting. So remember earlier we talked about making sure that your garden, is close, pretty much close to you so that you can keep an eye on it. So one of the main reasons for that is you want to be able to scout it. So you should be searching your garden high and low for signs of pest damage. So that doesn't just mean I'm going to walk by it, and glance down at it real quick, looks good, and then that's it. You want to look under the leaves, look on the stems, is anything different from yesterday or the day before? You want to constantly check on your garden because, if you don't, one day you can come out there and then it's too late for you to do anything. And then watering is another prevention practice. So how many of you all water your plants in your garden like we see on this left side picture? You can unmute yourselves or use the chat if you want.
Yes, I do that.
Yep.
I do as well.
Yep. So, and most people probably do this because, it's easy, right? Easy on your back, it's quicker for you to water things. But so actually, with veggie crops, so you want to keep the leaves as dry as possible. And I know, this week we're getting a bunch of rain, right? But the longer the leaves stay wet, the more susceptible they are to different diseases to come in and attack that plant. So what you can do about it at least is if you're watering your plants, you would want to target the water at the root zone. So that's why it's best to use something like soaker hoses or drip irrigation, because once you use these, they're just targeting all that water to the root zone and then the leaves are able to stay dry. So when possible, you want to keep those leaves as dry as possible. And then harvesting on time. So this is a picture of a school garden that I helped with a few years ago. So the weird thing about this picture is you have tomatoes on the ground, and then I believe this was like a cabbage plant. So those two crops are from two different seasons, right? So that means that cabbage plant was planted and it was never harvested or pulled up, but you can see how badly eaten up it is, and then you couple that with the rotting tomatoes on the ground. So this whole situation introduces or can introduce pest problems because if you leave things in the field too long, then you're inviting a lot of insects, for example, to come in, and that could cause problems for your other crops. So making sure that you're harvesting stuff on time and you're not allowing it to rot in your garden as well. And then plant spacing. So I see this a lot with tomatoes, right? So a lot of tomatoes we grow can get really bushy and tall and wide. And so this is also another picture that I took. And this is just a bunch of tomatoes that are all clumped together. So if you don't space out your plants right, if one plant falls victim to some type of disease or pest problem, then that pest problem can easily or more easily spread to the other plants around it, because everything about this area, all the plants are touching. There's not a lot of space for air ventilation when the leaves do get wet. So you're just creating an environment for pests to thrive by not spacing them correctly. So here's a better picture of spacing, at least. But on that chart that I showed you all earlier, that actually tells you the ideal spacing for a variety of different crops. And then weed control. So, I hate pulling weeds, right? Like I wish, I could just plant my garden and then weeds just wouldn't grow in it. But, that's not going to happen. So weeds are, can be considered a pest, right? So this picture shows, some squash on the right, and it shows some probably Bermuda grass, some very small weeds in the garden. So right now, this is the best stage for you to remove weeds because they're small, they're a lot easier to kill with chemicals if you would like to use that. And then, so then we have this picture here. So this is a picture, pretty much the perfect garden, right? Everything is spaced well. There's not a lot of weeds here. But say, you go on a vacation or you're gone for a week or two, and then you come back to this, right? The weeds are just out of control. So at this point, chemical control of these weeds is probably highly not recommended, because you would have to use so much chemical herbicide to cover all that to even kill it. And then as far as manual control of this, you can't really use a lawnmower. You're probably gonna have to cut them down with different tools. So it's just a headache, right? So mainly the thing with weeds is you wanna target weeds when they're small. And also you wanna keep in mind that weeds can also be good homes for different pests that attack your garden plants. So yeah, hand pulling is, a common way. Mowing, mulching is really helpful with weed control. So, there's a ton of different mulches you can use. You can use pine straw. You can use newspaper and cardboard, which is a real natural way to kind of recycle your waste, because they're just going to break down. You can use wood chips. So, yeah, so those things are going to do a good job of helping to control those weeds and helping to control those pest populations. And then, of course, tillage. And the page is still loading here. Let's see. All right, so the second strategy you can use is mechanical control. So mechanical control is basically the physical things that you do to prevent pests from becoming a problem. So this is mainly going to include, things like putting up fences and barriers and hand picking different insects off your plants. And then cultural control is things that you do kind of every day in the garden. So in this instance, this would be an example of rotating your crops. So you don't want to plant the same crops in the same place every single year, because you're going to help build up those pest populations in your garden. So you want to make sure that you're rotating out what you plant and what spot. So here's one example. If you plant root crops in that area, switch to fruiting crops, and then switch to leafy crops, switch to legume crops like beans. So constantly rotating out different families of crops is going to also help with pest control. And then adding some color, right? So these are cone flowers. So adding color to your garden, especially flowers that attract pollinators like bees and butterflies and other beneficial insects, is going to help with natural pest control. So making sure you have a variety of different flowers around your garden is definitely a plus. So in the warmer months, so we're talking spring and summer. So these are my favorite flowers to plant. So you have cosmos flowers, which produce, a ton of blooms, super easy to grow. And, bees love them, butterflies love them. Same with the zinnias. And these flowers, come in a lot of different colors as well. And then cone flowers, what we just saw, black-eyed Susans. And then asters are a really good fall flower to plant as well. And then making sure that you're using some herbs. So herbs act kind of like the flowers. They help attract different beneficial insects too. Rosemary and oregano are perfect for the fall. And then overall, this is how you want your garden to look, right? You don't just want to have, 10 tomato plants and then that's it. You want to mix in, some herbs, some flowers in there to help create a diverse environment for your garden. So, which brings us to biological control. So this is the use of natural enemies to control pests in your garden. So ladybugs, for example, are a natural predator of aphids. So if you have an environment that is suitable for ladybugs, then they're going to look for those aphids that are on your veggie crops. So that's an example of using those natural enemies. And this is probably one of my favorite examples. So is anyone familiar with this? This is a tomato hornworm caterpillar. Does anyone know what those white eggs are?
Is that from the tachinid fly?
So these white eggs are from a very small parasitic wasp. So first off, so this green caterpillar is a tomato hornworm caterpillar. You can see the little horn on the back. So this is a common pest in tomatoes and peppers. So this wasp finds these caterpillars and basically deposits its eggs inside this caterpillar. And you can see these white eggs. So these white eggs contain more parasitoid wasps that are basically going to eat this caterpillar alive and kill it, and they're going to continue the process. So this is, probably one of the coolest examples of biological control of pests, right? But if you have tomatoes and you see this caterpillar without these eggs, I would suggest that you just hand pick it or remove it. But if you do see this caterpillar and it has these white eggs on it, that's a sign that natural enemy has already attacked it. And these eggs are going to do the same thing to other caterpillars that they find. So keep that in mind. So then lastly, last step of IPM is chemical control. So after you go through all those steps of prevention, mechanical control, cultural control, natural control, if none of those things have yielded the results you want, now we can talk about what can we apply chemically to lower this pest damage, right? So these are just some examples of some organic pesticides that are common for vegetable gardens: spinosad, insecticidal soap, neem oil. So although they are organic pesticides and they're of course conventional pesticides, I always tell people that make sure you read the label, right? Because they're organic or natural doesn't mean they're harmless, right? So right now we live kind of in a scrolling society, with our phones and tablets and all that. So we just tend to kind of skim over things. But really, if you're, applying any chemical, especially to, a food crop that you're going to eat, you want to make sure that it's labeled for the specific pest that you're dealing with, that's labeled for vegetables, and make sure that you're using it properly and safely. So yeah, and the label, of course, you'll see this, the label is the law. So speaking of that, this is probably the best example I could think of about not reading the label. So mothballs. So what do you all use mothballs for? What have you heard mothballs are used for besides moth control?
I had geckos, so I put it out there for the geckos.
Geckos, okay. Anybody else?
I know my grandma used to put it in her closet to keep her clothes fresh. I
Yep.
don't know how.
So no
I've
one
heard
is,
they're good for-
oh, go ahead.
we're good for snakes.
Yeah, snakes. Yeah, so with the snakes part, so I'll inform you that mothballs do not repel snakes. So that's probably one of the most common things that people use mothballs for. So first off, mothballs aren't labeled for snakes. They're not labeled for, any other products, but, what's listed on the label. So a lot of times, we can kind of get in trouble with this. So make sure that any pest product that you're using, make sure you're using it for what it's labeled for, and that's for the safety, of course, of you and your environment, right? So no mothballs for nothing other than moths. So then we got our home brews, right? So, I'm sure y'all have heard about these two. I've heard about, a farmer that uses like raw eggs and water, to keep away certain things, using hot sauce and garlic salt, soap, baking soda. You mix X, Y, and Z together. So with these, I can't give you any recommendations for home brews because, we don't have research that backs that up. So make sure you're careful with that if you're experimenting with different things. And then repellents. So repellents are kind of up and down, especially for deer. So, if a deer, is hungry enough, I don't know of any repellent that's really going to keep them away. So the best thing to do for deer is basically to have a fence or some type of barrier to protect your crops. So, but in summary, for a successful fall veggie garden, you want to make sure it's in a good location. You want to make sure that soil is of high quality, and we can help you with that with a soil test. Making sure you're managing the work and the resources associated with your garden, continuing to monitor it regularly, and then of course ask for help. So yeah, so here at the Extension Office, I'm here to help the citizens of Clayton County. So if you have pest problems or problems with your garden, you can call our office or you can send me questions to my email. And if there are any other topics anyone else wants to learn more about as it relates to agriculture, you can list those in the chat box. And then we're having a plant sale that you can still purchase plants from up until September 25th. So the link is at our Eventbrite. So if you're interested in that, please support us with this fundraiser. But other than that, if you have any questions, I'm here.
I highly appreciate you for the information and for your time as well. Definitely took some notes. Thank you.
Thanks. Have any more questions, don't be afraid to email me.
You said you would if we emailed you, you would send us that chart, correct?
Yep. And if you
Okay.
would like a copy of this presentation, I could send that to you. And also, this is all recorded, so this will be on our YouTube channel as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for attending. And then Connie asked, are there any flower seeds we can start now? She has the UGA pollinator blend. So a lot of the flowers, especially like those pollinator friendly flowers, you don't start those until spring and summer. Because right now, I guess the most common flower is going to be like pansies, things like that. So most of these pollinator friendly flowers are going to be started next year in the spring. Oh, and then one last question, will local coyotes be attracted to gardens? That's possible. I think coyotes have a wide range of things that they eat. But if that becomes a problem, you know, the best thing is probably going to be able to basically build a barrier around the garden and keep them out. But if we don't have any more questions, Ms. Kearney has a video of of a garden demonstration that Keep Riverdale Beautiful did, and I will turn it over to her so she can show us.
All right, guys, so I'm just gonna go over a quick slideshow with you guys just to share some of the programs and initiatives towards the end, and then go over a quick how-to video for portable gardens. Most of our population here in Riverdale, 56%, 56.5% to be exact, are leasing. So this poses challenges with regards to finding adequate space for gardening. You may have an issue where your landlord won't approve you doing an in-ground garden, or even maybe an above-ground garden. And also transporting your garden at move out could be challenging. So these days, many more people are choosing to start their own vegetable gardens in lieu of produce shopping, especially amid COVID-19. I know I'm sort of a germaphobe to a certain extent, so I don't like touching things that other people have touched. And, you know, as we all know, when people go in the store, when you're shopping, you're constantly touching. So some people may, like myself, have a little phobia about that. You may want to start your own garden at home. So if you don't have a lot of space to plant a garden, I just wanted to share some workarounds with you, no matter how much space you may have. So as Mr. Crumsey covered, here's some vegetables that are ideal for you to plant around this time of year in Georgia. So, and you can take a look at your vegetable planting chart in detail for that. Beets, of course, cabbage, green onions, lettuce, radish, and spinach, to name a few. And I'm going to play a quick video for you guys to demonstrate for those of you who may be leasing and just want some ideas for how to plant your portable veggie garden or raised bed veggie garden. And a portable garden is essentially nothing more than a small container plant. And it's relatively easy to locate. They're perfect for people who are renting in transition or have limited funds or restricted growing space. And on the other end, we have the raised bed gardening, which is a form of gardening in which the soil is enclosed 3 to 4 foot wide containment units, which are usually made of wood, rock, or concrete. And I'm going to show you guys one that we had built it was actually built by our public works team. And just a quick video recorded earlier today. Don't mind the Pepsi machine in some of the background. But let's check it out. And here we go.
Can you talk us through the video, please?
Absolutely. I'm sorry about the sound. So essentially what I did here, we used one of our raised beds. We planted first some seeds, some radish seeds, and then I planted romaine lettuce plant right next to it. Well, not right next to it, gave it some space. And just showing how to go about planting the seeds. You can split it if you like. You don't have to just do all seeds in your raised bed or all transplants. Just showing the soil that we use and the manure, the organic manure that we use that was already pre-mixed in that bed. And then the next item that I planted was inside of our portable garden. So that one, I actually looked up on that at our local Value Village. They were actually closed when I went by, so I found something that was outside. And I'm pretty resourceful when it comes to those things. And it's really simple. I just found a wicker basket, aligned it with a plastic garbage bag, popped some soil in there, put our seeds in. And then with that particular one, that was just for the seeds. That's something that's easily to transport because you just grab the handles when you move, or if you don't find a good area, if you find that the area that you put it in originally isn't getting enough sunlight, or it's not working for your plant's not vibing with it, it's easy to just pick it up and move it to another area in your home. So yeah, wicker baskets are pretty easy because they're lightweight, they're breathable. You get your oxygen and you get sunlight peeking in through those cracks and on top of your plant.
Make a good gift too.
Right. And these baskets, I mean, again, I found these at the thrift store, but people may have these, you may have these laying around your home. You may have gotten one of these for Mother's Day, or, you know, you never used it. You put it in a closet and never use it. Here's a good way to kind of bring it out and make good use of it. So right here, I am planting a lettuce plant. And there, that's just a different type of basket. It's already lined with plastic. And I already put some soil down in there, so I'm just going back over it with some additional soil to fill that plant in and keep it nice and secure. And that's a good one to also put on your windowsill, put it on your stoop, or your balcony if you have space for it. It's just really taking something that you have in your home and repurposing it. You can do this with old wine barrels, any old planters that you may not have used or may have been for flowers. You want to make sure, like Mr. Crumsy said, you have drainage. So you want to, if it doesn't have a hole in it, you want to drill a hole in the bottom if at all possible. And that's pretty much it. So let me go on to the next slide.
Those are excellent ideas. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. So again, like Mr. Crumsy mentioned, location is very important. So I just highlighted some areas in your home and some types of gardens that you can set up in your home, whether it is a windowsill garden, something on your balcony. You can pot your veggies and put them on your balcony if you want to set up an indoor herb garden. There's options for that, or if you want to do a vertical garden in your home, there's options for that. The idea is to make sure that you have the most natural sunlight in that area. And just wanted to mention, we do have a pollinator oasis over at our regional park. So if you're in the area, definitely swing by, observe those pollinators at work. They'll be out there for a little bit longer before we switch those plants out for the fall. But if you walk by there, we do have a huge population of walkers and joggers that frequent the park that love that area. They love to walk past that because it's always filled with butterflies and bees and everything you can imagine. So, and then just drop some more ideas out there for your portable garden. So again, a wicker basket can be turned into a portable garden. Wine barrels, of course, clay pot. If you have your kids or you have someone in your home that may have some old rain boots, you can use those. Just want to make sure you have some drainage down at the bottom. Or you could also use, as you see in the lettuce bowl here, one of those strainer bowls. for your lettuce or your green leafy greens. And lastly, just a cool idea, you could take one of those old toys that your kids don't play with anymore that may have outgrown, and you can repurpose that into a portable pot. Those things are pretty easy to those little cards are pretty easy to pick up and take with you. They're lightweight. You pop a few plants in there, you have a whole garden that you turn that into. So just a few ideas. And lastly, just wanted to plug our 2 events coming up this weekend. Both will be at the Town Center this weekend, September 19th, from 9 until 12, the Great American Cleanup. We will be accepting recyclables as well at this event, electronic recyclable items, and we'll also be doing our Great American Cleanup. So we'll be breaking off into groups and cleaning up 4 different areas of the city. So if you're interested in joining, you can shoot me an email. My email's at the bottom, or you can register at eventbrite.com. And lastly, we are doing a recycling event with Brooks Crossing to just kind of spread the word about how important recycling is, whether you have immediate access to it or not. So if you're in the area, you want to swing by, we will be giving away some prizes, playing a few games, and of course, taking your recycling. So that's on October the 3rd at Brooks Crossing Apartments. All right, and thank you guys so much.
Thank you. So much information. Those ideas were awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Oh, and I have a evaluation poll before you all leave. Let's see, launch polling. Yes. All right, it should be on the screen right now. So yeah, if you all can fill this out for me before you leave, and we definitely thank you all for attending this evening. Chat for